The emergency transmission reverberated across the galactic network, its tone laced with panic. A mining colony on the outskirts of the Curva's nebula had gone dark, with no distress beacon, no outgoing communications, nothing. The Council's initial investigation revealed a grim possibility. The colony had been overtaken by a Zarnic swarm, a hive-minded species that consumed everything in its path. For days, the Galactic Council debated their options. Mobilizing a fleet was too risky. The Zarnic swarms were notorious for adapting to military strategies faster than they could be devised. Evacuation was impossible since the colony's location was deep within contested territory. Finally, as tensions peaked, the human ambassador, Alex Greaves, raised a hand. "Fine," he said, standing slowly. "I'll handle it." The room fell silent. Ambassador Greaves, the Xyrillian representative, began cautiously. "The Zarnic swarms are a galaxy-level threat. A single species cannot." "I said," Greaves interrupted, his voice calm but firm, "we'll handle it." The representatives exchanged uneasy glances. Humanity's reputation preceded them. They weren't the largest, the most advanced, or the wealthiest of the Council species, but they had a terrifying knack for solving problems in ways no one could predict. And when they said they'd handle something, the galaxy had learned one thing: stay out of the way. Within hours, the human fleet was on the move. Unlike the grand armadas of other species, humanity's ships were compact, practical, and bristling with strange, modular technology. They didn't seem like much compared to the sleek designs of the Xyrillians or the heavily armored Drovok dreadnoughts. But beneath their unassuming exterior lay the unpredictable ingenuity of a species that had survived millennia of self-inflicted chaos. As the fleet approached the mining colony, Greaves addressed the Galactic Council via a live feed. "This is going to look messy. Do not interfere. Do not question. And most importantly, do not panic." The feed cut off, leaving the Council in anxious silence. The first encounter with the Zarnic swarm was brief, but telling. The human fleet didn't engage in direct combat. Instead, they deployed strange devices, massive metallic spheres that pulsed with energy, into the colony's atmosphere. The Council's analysts scrambled to interpret the move. "What are they doing?" demanded a Varnis tactician. "No idea," muttered a Zalari observer, his eyes narrowing at the screen. The spheres detonated, releasing an electromagnetic pulse that rippled across the colony. The Zarnic swarm, which relied on a delicate binaural network to communicate, faltered. Their coordinated movements turned erratic, their hive mind disrupted. Before the swarm could recover, humanity unleashed Phase 2, a wave of drones carrying a viscous, metallic compound. The substance bonded to the Zarnic organisms, rendering their exoskeletons brittle and fragile. Within minutes, the swarm's numbers dwindled as their bodies collapsed under their own weight. But humanity wasn't done. The colony's defensive turrets, previously disabled by the swarm, suddenly roared to life. Humanity's engineers had remotely hacked the systems, turning the colony's own infrastructure against the invaders. The Zarnic hive was obliterated in less than an hour. Back on the Galactic Council, representatives watched in stunned silence as the live feed resumed. Greaves appeared on the screen, his uniform stained with soot and a tired grin on his face. "Colony secure," he said casually. "The swarm's been neutralized. Minimal collateral damage. We'll send a full report by morning." Ambassador Greaves, the Xyrillian representative, stammered, "That was unprecedented." "How did you—" "Trade secret," Greaves replied with a wink. "Oh, and we left behind a few devices to monitor the area. If the swarm tries anything, we'll know." The transmission ended, leaving the council chambers in a state of uneasy awe. Word spread quickly. Across the galaxy, species began reevaluating their perception of humanity. They weren't just a species of problem solvers. They were a species that approached every challenge as if it were personal. The phrase, "Fine, I'll handle it," became both a promise and a warning. It wasn't just the Zarnic swarm. Whenever diplomacy failed, When logistics crumbled or when ancient threats resurfaced, humanity stepped in with the same determined efficiency. And every time, the galaxy watched in equal parts relief and terror. Because when humans decided to handle something, they didn't just fix it, they made sure no one forgot how. The aftermath of the Zarnik incident left an indelible mark on the Galactic Council. Diplomatic channels were flooded with requests for humanity's aid in situations once considered hopeless. Planets facing ecological collapse, rogue AI threatening entire star systems, and even disputes between long-feuding species. Each petition carried a nervous undertone, a silent hope that humanity would answer with their trademark phrase, "Fine, we'll handle it." And they did. When the HFY system fell victim to a chain reaction of collapsing stars, humanity deployed an unprecedented fleet of mobile gravitational stabilizers. They built temporary star scaffolds, restoring balance long enough for the HFY population to evacuate. The Council was left stunned, not by the audacity of the plan, but by the sheer speed and success with which it was executed. A few years later, the Ultic Assembly faced the breakout of a superviral plague, one resistant to all known medicines. While the Council debated quarantine protocols and containment measures, humanity quietly deployed their biocrisis team. Instead of fighting the virus directly, they engineered symbiotic bacteria that rendered the plague inert, effectively turning the disease into its own cure. The Ultic ambassador later remarked, "They didn't just stop the plague. They outthought nature itself." But not all responses were met with gratitude. The Darvik Confederacy learned this the hard way. A militaristic species, the Darvik had been steadily encroaching on the territories of weaker neighbors, claiming resources and enforcing subjugation. When they launched a full-scale assault on a neutral trade hub, humanity stepped in. The Council, divided on how to handle the situation, was blindsided when humanity acted unilaterally. Within weeks, Darvik fleets were in disarray. Human cyber warfare crippled their communication networks, turning their warships into isolated, panicked cells. Precision strikes dismantled their supply chains without harming civilian infrastructure. By the time the Darvik warlords attempted a counterattack, humanity had already brokered alliances with several Darvik client species, leaving the Confederacy isolated. The Darvik capitulated, and humanity presented their terms: reparations, demilitarization, and a formal apology to the Council. "You have no authority to dictate terms," one of the Darvik generals spat during negotiations. Greaves, now the unofficial face of humanity's interventions, leaned forward. His tone was calm, his words measured. "We didn't need authority. We needed results. You're welcome." The Council was furious, at first, but as the Darvik threat dissolved and trade routes reopened, many quietly admitted that humanity's directness had prevented a far greater conflict. By now, the phrase "fine, I'll handle it" had taken on a mythic quality. To some, it was a reassurance. To others, a harbinger disruption. Humanity had become the galaxy's unyielding troubleshooters, their methods unconventional but undeniably effective. Yet, humanity wasn't without critics. Some council members worried that their interventions risked destabilizing the balance of power. Others questioned what humanity wanted in return for their efforts. Surely no species could be so altruistic. Humanity's response was always the same: "We want what you want: peace, prosperity, and the chance to thrive." The true test came when an ancient entity, dormant for eons, awoke in the Andari void. It called itself Yalkarath, a being of living energy that consumed entire systems to sustain itself. Initial attempts to communicate were met with silence, followed by devastation. 3 council fleets were annihilated in as many days. The council convened in desperation. "This isn't a swarm," the Xyrillian representative said, her voice trembling. "It's not a rogue AI or a plague. It's a force of nature. What can we do?" Greaves stood, his expression grim. "We'll handle it." No one argued. What followed became legend. Humanity didn't confront Yalkarath with fleets or weapons. Instead, They devised a plan to trap it using a series of artificial singularities, creating a vast energy sink that rendered the entity inert. The operation took months, with humanity working tirelessly while the rest of the galaxy watched in silent awe. When it was over, Yal-Karath was contained, its destructive potential neutralized. Humanity's leaders stood before the council, not to boast or demand gratitude, but to offer a single request. Next time, stand with us. Together, we can handle anything. For once, the galaxy believed them. The containment of Yal-Karath marked a turning point in galactic history. For the first time, the Galactic Council began to see humanity not as a wild card, but as a cornerstone of their collective survival. Species that had once looked upon humans with suspicion now sought alliances, eager to learn from their unorthodox methods and seemingly endless resourcefulness. The galaxy wasn't entirely ready to embrace humanity as a leader. Fear of their unpredictability lingered. But humanity didn't ask for leadership. They asked for collaboration, for trust. Slowly, that trust began to grow. Months after Yal-Karath's containment, the Council convened to discuss a growing threat in the Silent Expanse. A rogue faction of mercenaries, equipped with advanced weaponry, had started dismantling trade routes, extorting weaker systems, and leaving chaos in their wake. The Council debated for weeks, hesitant to act. Humanity sat quietly during most of the discussions, observing the endless cycle of arguments and delays. Finally, Greaves spoke, breaking the tension. "If you're waiting for a perfect plan, you'll never act," he said. "The longer we hesitate, the worse this gets. Either we act together, or—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. This time, the Council surprised itself. Rather than letting humanity act alone, a coalition of fleets was assembled, including ships from over a dozen species. Humans didn't lead the mission. They worked alongside others, offering strategies and sharing resources freely. The operation was a success, not because of any single species' contribution, but because they finally operated as a unified force. For many, it was a revelation. Proof that the galaxy could face its challenges together if it trusted in its collective strength. Humanity, true to form, didn't linger on accolades. While others celebrated, they were already analyzing the mission's weaknesses, preparing for the next threat. In time, the phrase "fine, I'll handle it" evolved. It became less a declaration of human intervention and more a rallying cry for the entire Council. Humans had shown that handling a crisis wasn't about dominance or control. It was about stepping up when it mattered, regardless of risk or reward. And the galaxy began to follow their lead. Years later, as Greaves prepared to retire from his role as ambassador, he was asked what humanity's greatest contribution to the galaxy had been. He thought for a long moment before answering. "Perspective," he said finally. "We taught the galaxy that strength isn't just about power or resources. It's about the willingness to act, to adapt, and to trust in each other, even when it's hard." The reporter, a young Xyrillian, hesitated before asking her final question. "And what do you think is the galaxy's greatest contribution to humanity?" Greaves smiled, a rare warmth in his often serious demeanor. "Hope," he said simply. "The hope that we don't have to handle it alone anymore." The galaxy would never forget the era when humans first stepped into the void, promising to handle the impossible. But perhaps their greatest legacy wasn't in what they did, but in how they inspired everyone else to do the same. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Where once there was division, now there was a fragile but growing unity. The Galactic Council, once a stage for endless debates and posturing, had become a hub of cooperation and progress. Joint fleets patrolled dangerous sectors. Shared research initiatives tackled universal challenges. Trade flourished in ways that benefited even the smallest and most vulnerable systems. Humanity, true to its nature, remained at the center of it all, but not as rulers or overlords. They had no desire for thrones or empires. Instead, they thrived in their role as advisors, innovators, and occasional troublemakers. Their uncanny ability to cut through bureaucratic inertia and confront problems head-on had earned them a place in galactic history, not as conquerors, but as catalysts for something greater. One day, a call came from the fringes of the galaxy, from a system so remote it barely registered on star maps. A strange signal had been detected, an ancient transmission in a language no one could decipher. The council debated for days about the potential risks of investigating. Some feared it might awaken another Yalkaroth. Others argued that the galaxy wasn't ready for another crisis. The human representative, no longer Greaves but a younger diplomat named Carolyn, listened patiently to the arguments before finally speaking. "We've faced the unknown before," she said, "and every time we've found a way through it, not because of one species, but because of all of us working together. So let's handle it. Not just humanity. All of us." There was a moment of silence, followed by a murmur of agreement. For the first time, the council voted unanimously. The expedition was the largest joint venture in galactic history. Ships from every major species joined the fleet, each bringing their own strengths and expertise. Scientists, engineers, diplomats, and explorers worked side by side, their differences now a source of strength rather than division. When they reached the source of the signal, they found something none of them had expected, a derelict structure orbiting a dying star. It was vast, ancient, and utterly alien, unlike anything in the galactic records. The signal, they discovered, was a distress call, sent out eons ago by a civilization long extinct. As they explored the ruins, they uncovered records of that civilization's final days. They had faced a catastrophic threat, one they had been unable to overcome. Their final message wasn't a plea for help, but a warning to any who came after. Yet, alongside the warning, there was a fragment of hope. Blueprints for a technology the ancient species had never finished. A device that could stabilize dying stars, prevent supernovae, and harness their energy to sustain life. The discovery was a turning point. Together, the galaxy's species completed the ancient designs, refining them with their combined knowledge. The first successful deployment of the star-stabilizing technology saved an entire system on the brink of collapse. It wasn't just a triumph of science. It was a testament to what the galaxy could achieve when it stood united. Years later, as Carolyn reflected on the events that had followed humanity's infamous "fine, we'll handle it" declaration, she realized something profound. Humanity had never sought to change the galaxy. They had only wanted to survive within it. But in their struggle to survive, they had changed everything. And now, as species once at odds stood side by side, solving problems together, exploring the unknown, and building a future none of them could have imagined alone, humanity's greatest lesson had finally taken root. The galaxy didn't need a savior. It needed partners.